So, let me tell you a tale. A tale of trains. Long ago, there was a little boy named Walt Disney. Walt loved trains. I mean, Walt Disney really, really loved trains. The farm on which Walt grew up was next to a railroad track. He loved to sit outside by the track and watch for trains, and a beloved uncle of his was even an engineer. At age 16, Walt left home, and for a time he traveled the railroad lines, and when he was older and would eventually move to Los Angeles to find his calling making movies, it was a train which carried him there. Biographers like to imply that Walt loved trains because of what they represented to him. Things like freedom and possibility and progress. I never thought it was that deep. I mean, Walt Disney is a man whose taste in food never evolved beyond grilled cheese sandwiches and chili, which, I mean, relatable. I imagine that Walt loved trains in the way that little boys love Lightning McQueen. Trains are big and they look awesome, and they go fast. And if you have a little toy train, you get to go choo, choo. But maybe that's not it either. One of the boyhood tales of Walt Disney was that he would lie on his side in the dirt next to the railroad tracks, and he would press his ear to the rail and listen, sometimes for hours, until he would hear the rumble of a distant train. What else do you think he heard? What whispers do you think the locomotives shared with him on those still afternoons? Is it possible that they told him of his destiny? Did they rumble instructions? And what did they promise in return? You might be wondering why we're talking about trains. So this video is about Star Wars Land, but I have to talk about trains because trains are in its blood. Trains are its blood, like the veins are railroad tracks. And the blood is trains. Without trains, we'd likely have no Star Wars Land because we'd have no Disneyland to put it in. When grown-up Walt Disney was running his animation studio, he bonded with one of his top animators, Ward Kimball, over their shared love of trains. The story goes that Ward had Walt over for dinner and then just super casually and organically mentioned that he happened to have an elaborate miniature railroad in the backyard. I like to imagine that it was actually Ward playing an elaborate game of 4D chess after he found out that the boss loved trains. In 1948, Ward Kimball took Walt away to a weekend at a railroad fair. It was basically a bunch of hobbyists showcasing their tiny railroads. Each of the hobbyists wanted their train to stand out from everybody else's trains, so basically they would each pick their own little theme of what environment the train would be set in. So Walt spent what he would later describe as the best weekend of his life, watching a bunch of tiny trains rolling through intensely themed environments. And I firmly believe that this experience planted the seed which would later grow into the idea of Disneyland Park. Walt came home and built his own extensive model train set in the backyard. This one was 1/8 scale, which, hey, that's pretty big. He named the train the Lily Bell after his wife Lillian because Lillian was less than pleased about the train. I don't know if this helped. When Walt drew up his plans for a theme park, which was initially a much more modest idea called Mickey Mouse Park, it was a very simple concept, just a little village, a couple rides, and a train around the outside. Eventually, this idea expanded into the Disneyland Park we know today, and by the time it reached that point, it had expanded to be big enough to get its own full-size railroad. To this day, you can visit Disneyland and ride a full-size steam train, one of which is called the Ward Kimball. Or, if you're a member of the secret Club 33, you can ride in the luxury caboose called the Lily Bell, but you can't stop progress. Just like you can't stop your husband from building a train in the backyard. Sorry, okay. What am I thinking? This is going to be a really long YouTube video about Star Wars Land, Galaxy's Edge, the new very large section at Disneyland Park. Nobody is going to watch it if I don't break it down into some kind of numbered list. Since it's Star Wars, I decided to call the bullet points episodes. But don't get confused, I'm not breaking the video up into episodes. It's just gonna be a really long video. I'm doing the Star Wars thing, you'll see. Star Wars Land Episode 1, Why Star Wars Land? In the early 2000s, the Walt Disney Company was looking to expand by purchasing the theme park rights to the wildly popular Harry Potter series. So it's going pretty well, Rowling is in talks with Disney, everyone just assumes they're going to get it, but suddenly they start butting heads over Rowling wanting more creative control. As legend has it, the point of contention was a train. Where's my train? JK wanted a full-size Hogwarts Express to carry guests into Harry Potter Land, and Disney said that was too much. Both Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom at Disney World had full-size trains already and couldn't comfortably house more trains. Adding a Hogwarts Express to the existing parks would be expensive, unnecessary, and logistically inconvenient. The Walt Disney Company's new CEO was no Walt Disney. Too many trains, he said. I assume. "We'll have no more trains here." "You monster," Jenny said. "We will have trains here, as long as a dream is alive in a child's heart." Oh, sorry. I was reading from my fan fiction again. Whoops. Anyway, the CEO was anti-train, and he would suffer for it. The Wizarding World of Harry Potter would open at a competing theme park, Universal Studios Orlando, and see huge success, thanks in part to its large new train. Its success was even enough to pose a threat to the powerful Disney parks. Disney's first attempt at competition, Pandora: The World of Avatar, was beautifully designed and saw massive attendance from guests, but it wouldn't be considered as much of a draw as Wizarding World was for Universal, nor did it inspire anywhere near the level of interest in merchandise. Their second attempt to compete with Harry Potter would be their own Star Wars land. It would coincide with the release of a new trilogy rebooting the franchise, and it was going to be big. 14 acres, which is the largest expansion Disneyland Park has ever seen since it opened in 1955. If you're not a frequent visitor to Disneyland, but you are peripherally aware that it's situated inside the very busy city of Anaheim, you're probably wondering where all this extra space came from. And that brings us to Star Wars Land Episode 2. The Land. Despite being the third teensiest Disney park worldwide at only 83 acres, Disneyland Park is one of the most popular in terms of sheer annual ticket sales. And that's because the cream rises to the top. The limited space means that if an attraction is too unpopular or just deemed too old, they will take it out and replace it with something new. Sometimes they even take out an attraction that everybody likes for no reason. So whenever Disneyland gets a new ride, chances are that it is sitting on the bones of another ride that came before it. The land on which Star Wars Land is built has actually been home to two different attractions. The first... well, that's right. I guess it was a train.
All aboard the mine train, we're leaving right away. Heading for the wilderness where the bear and coyotes play.
Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland was inspired by the old Disney nature documentaries and was a slow, sprawling, easygoing ride through the western wilderness past over 200 animatronic figures of bears, elk, beavers, mountain lions, rattlesnakes, wild pigs. Segments of the ride included the western town of Rainbow Ridge, Bear Country, Beaver Valley, the Rainbow Caverns, and the Living Desert, a whimsical portion with mechanical rock formations that would tumble menacingly toward you, and human-looking cactuses.
Desert heat sometimes gets to you and makes these here cactus take on strange shapes.
In addition to the mine train, you could also go through Nature's Wonderland on a stagecoach, a Conestoga wagon, or a pack mule. All of these other ones were pretty short-lived, but there were like 2 magical years where all of these different modes of transport were going through the wilderness simultaneously. Not to go on like a giant tangent, but to me this really exemplifies Walt Disney's commitment to using modes of transportation as not only conveyances, but as sort of a futuristic mode of ornamentation. So if you're going through Nature's Wonderland on your little train, you might look overhead and see a rock bridge with a pack of mules going across it, or see a full-sized covered wagon lumbering by in the distance. Over the trees, you can see the very top of the paddle wheeler making its way down the river. These aren't just rides for the people who are on them, they are also symbiotically enhancing the experience for everybody in their sightline. It made for a very lively section of the park and also just made you feel like you were in a real western wilderness being explored by settlers. Early Tomorrowland, my personal favorite, operated by the same principle, so you might look out and see from one vantage point a people mover train, a skyway bucket, a monorail, and a submarine all passing by in the same view. Anyway, the mine train was the longest surviving conveyance through Nature's Wonderland, and it had a pretty good run. It lasted clear up until 1977, the same year Star Wars hit theaters. That's a coincidence. It's just kind of cool. But some Nature's Wonderland remnants and references survived for years, and it's still kind of a darling of old theme park enthusiasts. The ride's loading area and a large chunk of its land was taken over by the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad roller coaster, which is kind of a spiritual successor, even though it's much more exciting. It reuses the buildings of the town of Rainbow Ridge and a handful of the mechanical animals.
Tortoises! A buzzard! Show me the snakes! Show me the snakes! Snake!
The first lift hill of the roller coaster takes you through a cave, which is a visual reference to the Rainbow Caverns. And you know, it's a train. Down the trail from Big Thunder, they even put in a little tribute to the Conestoga wagons. This was during Disneyland's partnership with McDonald's in the late 90s and early 2000s. They constructed a building that looked like a covered wagon, and it sold McDonald's French fries and nothing else. It was known as Westward Ho Fries, or in some cases, the Conestoga Fry Wagon. I don't think any of us will ever see anything as kitschy in our entire lives as the Conestoga Fry Wagon, and I miss it dearly. I was really hoping they'd bring it back for Star Wars Land. Maybe like park it right next to the blue milk so you'd have your hot fries and your cold blue milk. But there are dreams that cannot be.